Good morning. This is Dr. Sunday Kreider with Three Sisters Surrogacy. And today we are going to talk about the requirements that we look for in going through our surrogate applicants. There are a number of requirements set forth by the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, ASRM, and are guidelines that are followed by infertility physicians as well as surrogacy agencies. So I would like to touch on some of these requirements today. And if you have any further questions, you're welcome to ask them in the comments or email us. So I'm going to just adjust this. Okay. There are three different sections that we're going to look at today. One is the general overall requirements for surrogacy. Then we're going to go over the pregnancy requirements, the medical requirements, and finally the legal requirements to be a gestational surrogate. When we first have an applicant or an application come through our database, there are some initial screening characters that we look for in terms of whether or not the candidate falls within the guidelines. The very first thing that we look at is the age of the candidate. A person applying to be a gestational surrogate needs to be of legal age, so the low end cutoff is age 21. Now that's very young to be a surrogate, and we would look at that on a case-by-case basis. We prefer to have somebody that's a little bit older than that, but somebody that's had a child and has enough maturity to understand what they're going to be going through as being a gestational surrogate. On the high end, our cutoff is 38, and it's more like 38-ish, and that's a soft cutoff. So if a woman is 39 or 40, we may consider their application if they've had a child within the last couple of years. But as we age, we also run the risk of having a more complicated pregnancy. As we go through in selecting our surrogates, we want to be sure we're selecting women that are going to be able to carry a pregnancy in a healthy way. They're going to be able to go home to their family. We're going to get a healthy baby out of this. So we want to be sure that we are stacking the deck, so to speak, as we're selecting these candidates. The next thing that we look at is the body mass index, or BMI, of a gestational surrogate. The American Society of Reproductive Medicine suggests that the BMI cutoff should be 32 or less. And there is some research that backs this cutoff. It's been found that women with a heavier weight or a heavier BMI, they can have a more complicated pregnancy. There is a higher risk for gestational diabetes. There's a higher risk for preeclampsia. That's not to say that all women with a higher BMI are going to have these things. There's just a higher risk than a woman, say, with a BMI of 26, 27. So in stacking the deck, to use that term again, and trying to create the healthiest environment possible, we follow the physician's guidelines on having that BMI of 32 or less. This is probably one of the more common reasons why we would decline an application. Now, we do have a Facebook group, Low Carb Surrogacy, for those women that still really want to be a surrogate but maybe on the high end of their BMI. And it's a support group to help these women look at getting their BMI down so that they will qualify to be a gestational carrier. The next thing that is very important in screening these applicants is that there is no drug use. They need to have a very stable background, especially no recent drug use. We prefer no drug use ever, but occasionally we'll get somebody that says smoked a joint in high school. Is that going to disqualify me? We're going to look at the big picture and see how the lifestyle is in general. We want there to be no smoking by the surrogate and no vaping, And we also prefer that there's no smoking or vaping in the home as well. Whenever a surrogate candidate goes into the fertility clinic, she will be screened for nicotine and drug use. So even if there's somebody else that's smoking in the home, this can turn up a positive nicotine screen on the screening test. We also want to be sure that although social drinking is okay prior to the treatment, and we're talking 1 to 2 drinks a week, once the surrogate starts treatment, she needs to not drink at all. So again, creating that healthy environment to bring a baby into the world. So here's some of the medical requirements that we look for. Now we will get a copy of the surrogate's medical records and review them quite carefully. We want to be sure that the surrogate herself has no health complications. It's very important. Pregnancy is not easy. So it's very important that there's no cardiac issues, no blood pressure issues. This also goes with the BMI, that the woman is a very healthy woman. We want to assess what the risk for Zika is in a candidate's world. If you recall, in the last couple of years, Zika is a virus that's transmitted by mosquitoes. The problem with Zika is if you're not a pregnant person and you get bit by a mosquito that has the Zika virus and you contract the Zika virus, you may have cold or flu-like symptoms, and that may be the extent of the issues that you have from it. However, if a woman is pregnant and contracts Zika, it can cause a condition called microcephaly in the fetus. So microcephaly literally means little head or small head. And in this situation, as the fetus develops, the head is abnormally small. The skull and the brain do not form properly. So it can cause a host of issues in the fetus. So when we're screening a gestational carrier, we ask things like, have you been into a Zika area in the last 6 months? A Zika area would be Mexico, Caribbean, tropical areas. Southern Florida had some issues. We also want to know if you're going to be going into those areas in the next year. And if that's the case, we may need to defer you being a surrogate until you've had your travel done. A gestational surrogate candidate will see the fertility doctor and will have a medical evaluation. There will be blood work. The doctor will also evaluate the uterus to make sure that it's a nice, healthy environment, that there's no strange lumps or bumps or anything like that. The surrogate will also have a psychological assessment. We have a number of PhD psychologists that we work with, and they will visit with the gestational carrier and go through the process with her and make sure that she understands the emotional side of what she'll be going through in the coming months. She'll also give a test that is like a personality test to see where the surrogate falls in terms of her personality. And then there's a report written, and that's provided to the physician as part of the whole package of surrogate information. A gestational surrogate must also not have any current sexually transmitted or communicable diseases. So this would include chlamydia and gonorrhea, an active herpes virus. Now, sometimes we will allow a candidate that has herpes or HPV as long as there hasn't been an outbreak in a long time. There can also be no, obviously, HIV, Hep B, or Hep C. So these are all things that the surrogate would be screened for. Now let's touch on some of the pregnancy requirements that a gestational surrogate must have. A surrogate must have had at least one pregnancy. That gives us a pregnancy history. We know that she's had a healthy pregnancy, and we really prefer that she's done having babies, just in case something happens during the surrogate pregnancy. So we like to see no more than 2 C-sections. The reason is, every time you have a C-section, with each additional C-section, you're increasing the risk of uterine rupture. It can be a very dangerous complication. It can cause death of the baby. It can cause death of the the surrogate or the mother. So we want to be sure that we have no more than 2 C-sections, because we need our surrogates to go home to their babies too. And we need a baby to go home with its new parents. A surrogate must not have any more than 5 pregnancies. This is an ASRM guideline, American Society of Reproductive Medicine, but at least 1. So again, establishing that pregnancy history. And then there needs to not be any pregnancy complications. So what I mean by that is no history of preeclampsia, no history of gestational diabetes, and no history of preterm labor or delivery. We're also going to look at no previous miscarriages or no more than 1 miscarriage, and we would take that on a case-by-case basis. So let's discuss the legal requirements to be a surrogate. First of all, you must be a U.S. citizen or a legal resident. You cannot be on any social assistance. By that I mean Medicaid, Lone Star card, TANF, those sorts of benefits. Now, your kids can be on CHIP or Medicaid, but you as a surrogate cannot. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that Medicaid cannot cover surrogacy. So we don't want to use Medicaid as an insurance for surrogacy. The second reason is that we want to be sure that your surrogacy compensation is not your sole income as you go through this process. Because what if something happens mid-pregnancy and then you're not receiving that compensation anymore? And then the third thing is receiving surrogate compensation could affect your ability to get benefits. So we want to be sure that an applicant is not on social assistance. And if you are, we do get quite a few people that want to be surrogates, but they are on social assistance. We just say to wait. Wait until your life is in a little bit better or more stable situation, and then consider reapplying. A surrogate must be in a stable marriage or be single. The reason is, number 1, you cannot get a divorce if you're pregnant, and number 2, the husband, if you are married, has to sign off on all of the legal paperwork. So if something happens in the marriage and he refuses to sign, that would make things a little more difficult as we proceed in the pregnancy. So we want to be sure that you've got a good support system, your husband is on board. You cannot be separated to go through this process. And then finally, the surrogate will have to meet contractual obligations. So what this means is, as you go through the surrogacy process, you will have legal representation, and there will be contracts written to establish what your role is during the process, to establish what the intended parent's role is in the process, and to be protective of both you and the parents. So those are the general requirements to be a gestational surrogate. If you have any more questions, you can visit our website at www.threesisterssurrogacy.com, or you can email us at info@threesisterssurrogacy.com. Thank you so much for joining us today.